Hello everyone, and welcome back to Wednesdays here on the Pagan Perspective. I am your host Eric, and this week we are talking about the fact that Satan want to fill you up. So this week we are talking about an article that Delia sent to us. She wanted us to read it and give our thoughts on it. Well, I'm going to make this a very long video. I'm sorry, you guys. Just bear with me. But I am going to have put the link to this article in the doobly-doo, in the underneath bits. So I'll give you guys just a minute here. Go ahead and click on that so that you guys can read along with me. Go ahead. No, seriously, I'll wait. You guys may be incensed enough at this to read it. Just go. Okay. Are you back so that you can read along in separate windows? Yes? Good? Alright. So, putting my glasses on instead of taking them off after the intro. Alright, so we have this article here, and I'm just going to go ahead and read most of it and then stop at the bits that I want to discuss. So, National Review's Betsy Woodruff, who is a writer for the National Review, Betsy Woodruff, looked into controversial Virginia lieutenant gubernatorial candidate and pastor. Let's just start with the fact that I am a fan of separation of church and state. I don't think they should be in the same place. E.W. Jackson's 2008 book, 10 Commandments to an Extraordinary Life, for a deeper understanding of his views on the human spirit, society, and yoga. Yes, yoga. According to Jackson, when one hears the word meditation, it conjures an image of Maharishi Yoga talking about finding a mantra and striving for nirvana. Not a bad thing for those of us who know what those terms mean. The purpose of such meditation is to empty oneself. That's not the full reason. That's not the full purpose. The purpose is to calm oneself, to remove the clutter of one's own mind so one can then listen for the divine and be ready to accept that into oneself. But Jackson states, Satan is happy to invade the empty vacuum of your soul and possess it. That is why people serve Satan without ever knowing or deciding to. But no one can be a child of God without making a decision to surrender to him. So what you're telling me is Satan is more powerful than your God? Your Satan is more powerful than your God. That makes no sense to me if your God is supposed to win. This is, by the way, going to be very heavily dosed with opinion, just so you guys know. Let's see. Beware of systems of spirituality which tell you to empty yourself. You will end up filled with something you probably do not want, like understanding and, tolerance. And those are my opinions, not what is written here. You guys should be following along. Come on. Going back to the reading. Yoga has become so normalized in American life that this seems an extreme position, no pun intended, and yet Jackson's warning about on the spiritual dangers of yoga are not uncommon among Christian conservatives representing a variety of denominations. She still means that those are all Christian denominations, but many Christian conservatives. R. Albert Moeller Jr., president of Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, a school to teach you about their church, nothing wrong with that, sparked a passionate discussion on the topic of Christians and yoga in 2010 when he wrote in a book review, to a remarkable degree, the growing acceptance of yoga points to the retreat of biblical Christianity in the culture. I see that as, and I, again, interjecting my opinion here, I see that as not necessarily a bad thing. I see that as the community and the people doing what they will, and I think if your entire religion is based on the Bible and not your community, I don't think I'm going to feel so bad about it, retreating out of the culture. Moving on, yoga begins and ends with an understanding of the body that is, to say the very least, at odds with a Christian understanding. Let's go back to that statement. Yoga begins and ends with an understanding of the body that is, to say the very least, at odds with the Christian understanding. It does not begin and end with an understanding of the body. It begins with an understanding of the body and the mind and the consciousness, and then moves on from there. That is not the beginning and end. So, I'm kind of tearing this apart, and that's why this is going to be a very long video, and I apologize for that. But those of you who actually are at home arguing, reading along, and understanding my points here will understand that I kind of couldn't help it. So the next part says, Christians are not called to empty the mind, to see the human body as a means of connecting to and coming to know the divine. That's mostly true. They don't expect that you're going to keep yourself healthy. They expect that you are going to be able to connect to the divine by prayer and prayer alone, and experiencing through your work with others that you will experience the divine. And that's fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but that is what I understood growing up in a Christian community, was that the only way to contact God was to be open to Him, which kind of contradicts the idea of opening yourself through yoga. Anyway, and, personal prayer and, talking to people who have a better connection, quote unquote, to God than you do. Where was I? Christians are not called to empty the mind or see the human body as a means of connecting and coming to know the divine. Believers are called to meditate upon the Word of God. They use the word meditate like it was a bad thing earlier, but now they're okay with using meditate. That pisses me off more than a little. Believers are called to meditate upon the Word of God, an external word that comes to us by divine revelation, not to meditate by the means of incomprehensible syllables. So they're saying that if you are using a mantra, an om or a lam or whatever you happen to use in yoga, I don't know that much about yoga, but I do happen to know that they use certain vocal sounds to evoke certain reactions. That's about as far as I know. The bare fact is that yoga is a spiritual discipline, which it is not. Yoga is a physical and spiritual discipline by which the adherent is trained to use the body as a vehicle for achieving consciousness of the divine. Now, that is not a bare fact. That is a fact, or, I don't know so much about yoga that you can't have one without the other. I don't know. But I don't think it's a bare fact that yoga must contain, must be a spiritual discipline, because I see yoga studios all over the damn place, and I don't see any of them with, shrines out front. I've never been in, so I can't say one way or another. That, again, opinion. To use the body as a vehicle for achieving consciousness of the divine. Christians are called to look to Christ for all that we need, and to obey Christ through obeying His Word. So, you're saying that it's not okay to involve your body in the process of spirituality. You just have to believe by doing what you're told. You have to look to Christ for all that we need. Okay, so if you need something, that sounds the opposite of the way I was raised, even. Because if you have a problem, you ask God about it. If you have a problem that has a solution, you fix it. By obeying His Word. We are not called to escape the consciousness of this world by achieving an elevated state of consciousness, but to follow Christ in the way of faithfulness. Let's go back to, we are not called to escape the consciousness of this world. No, that's actually kind of the opposite of the idea of prayer and internal thought and waiting and listening for what was referred to many, many times as the still small voice of conscience and, divine word, So you are supposed to stop and listen. At least growing up in the Mormon faith, I don't know how it is for other Christian folks that grew up in a slightly different area that I did. But growing up LDS, I was told that I should pray and then wait and listen and be open to signs and signals and, divine intervention and stuff like that. So yes, you do need to stop and quiet yourself and quiet your thoughts, and you do have to do the same things that yoga, at least in my understanding of yoga, asks for. So also it doesn't, I don't know what yoga does for people's inward appreciation of understanding, because I've never participated, nor have I really studied up on it. But I do know that when I was growing up as a little Mormon boy, it was my job to listen and to think and to ask God for help and then listen for said advice. So I was also follow Christ in the way of faithfulness. Does that mean just without any concept of right or wrong, you do what you're told by your church leaders? That doesn't make sense to me, because they're human beings and therefore fallible. And I'm assuming that as an esoteric idea, yoga and the teachings of yoga would probably, cover that at least a little. I don't know. Moving on. There's nothing wrong with physical exercise, and yoga positions in and of themselves are not the main issue. But these positions are teaching postures with a spiritual purpose. Christians who practice yoga are embracing, or at a minimum, flirting with a spiritual practice that threatens to transform their own spiritual lives into a post-Christian spiritual polyglot reality. Okay. So we'll come back to that statement of the positions themselves are not the main issue, because I think that's addressed a little bit later. But to transform their own spiritual lives into a post-Christian spiritually poly. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time with words now. Blah. To transform their own spiritual lives into a post-Christian spiritually polyglot reality. Okay. Polyglot sounds like a really terrible word. Just so you guys don't have to look it up, it means many languages. Okay. Bilingual, polyglot is just many different tongues, many different sounds. It's like anyone who has taken bits and pieces from several religions or spiritual practices and uses the term eclectic because of that, they are kind of a spiritual polyglot, and there is nothing wrong with that. Using that word is intended to be an incensing, irritating, makes you feel bad about something. That's all it means, is lots of different, from different places. So embracing, or at minimum flirting with, a spiritual practice that threatens to do that, not necessarily. If you walk into, let's say, as a pagan, you walk into a Christian church and you take the sacrament, does that mean that you are flirting with, making yourself a Christian? No. If you decide that you want to do yoga because it's good exercise and the stretching is good and it makes you healthier and maybe even makes you think differently about the people you are surrounded by, does that make you Hindu or Asian? No, that would be, I'm sorry, that was too much. Does it make you more of a Hindu? No. This is my point. Moving on, that prompted other pastors to come out against the ancient practice. Should Christians stay away from yoga because of its demonic roots? Asked megachurch pastor Mark Driscoll of Mars Hill Church in Washington State. Totally. Yoga is demonic. If you just sign up for a little yoga class, you're signing up for a little demon class. One thing I want to point out here, he is a pastor of a mega church. That means lots and lots of people, but I think there is some sort of overtly social, like filling up stadiums full of people, mega church type thing. Anyway, they are sensorial. They are very much, and these just as a generalization, not as a rule, but as a generalization, when you get a person into a room that has all of the other people in the room believing what he is saying, they go a little nuts and say things for sensation's sake. So when he puts it out quite so bluntly and quite so black and white, I think he's doing so because he wants to get his crowd fired up and he wants his people to be able to not be on the fence one way or another. He wants them absolutely devoted to the idea that he has. So, is it demonic? He thinks so. Is it really? God's no. So, moving on. Let's see. After demon classes, the former Vatican chief exorcist, just want you to understand, chief exorcist for the Vatican, agreed, practicing yoga is satanic. It leads to evil just like reading Harry Potter. Do you know the most evil thought I had reading Harry Potter? God damn my brain, I wish I could read faster. That was the most evil thought in my head. That, and I kind of wished that I could jump in and slap some people around because they're retarded and, you know, kill the bad guys earlier. But that's just, you know, that's what you do when you read, right? Anyway, so take into account that, you know, evil is Harry Potter is evil just like yoga. So it leads to evil just like reading Harry Potter. Father Gabriel Amorth said in 2011, his objection, yoga derives from Hinduism, a heathen religion. Heathens and Hindus are not the same thing. And is Hinduism even a religion, or is it a spiritual philosophy like Buddhism? I don't know. Anyway, leave me information in the comment section if you know. Yoga derives from Hinduism, a heathen religion that says there is reincarnation, not that he knows there is or is not. Pope John Paul II in 1989 also warned against the dangers of yoga as a seduction of spiritual seekers that can degenerate into a cult of the body, as opposed to, you know, the media, which promotes a particular body type. Anyone who's experienced with what I think of as the American yoga industrial complex knows that the Pope's warning gets an underlying tension in the way yoga is taught in the West. Either it is presented as an ancient spiritual practice conducted through the body, okay, and as such, one that can conflict with the religious tenets of other faiths, especially their fundamentalist strains, or it is assimilated into the competitive athletic cult of the body, shorn of its spiritual underpinnings and significance, and turned into something like Indian Pilates. I don't know if there's a difference between Indian Pilates and whatever everybody else is calling Pilates. Haven't the foggiest. But those two statements are, it is either an ancient spiritual practice, or that which can conflict with the religious tenets of other faiths, especially the fundamentalists, or it is a competitive athletic cult of the body. Does that mean that it would be any different than competitive bodybuilding without spiritual tenets or leanings or anything else like that, just making yourself stronger and healthier? And is there a problem with that? I suppose that's for us to decide individually. Moving on, all of which is just to say, this is the summary, all of which is just to say, sometimes it turns out that statements that look on the surface like crazy talk, yoga is satanic, actually reveal a lot about tensions faced by the faithful in a multicultural, religiously diverse society as they seek to be modern and also true to their own ancient monotheistic religion. Most people tend to ignore these questions, but it is the job of the religious leaders to explore them. And then goes on to explain that because she's writing for a political column for this website, the question for Virginia voters is whether they want such philosophical explorations to come from a political leader in Richmond. And then, there's an update at the end of it. If you guys are following along, you've probably already read ahead. I am reliably informed that some conservatives who like to stretch and are looking for an out to their religious conundrum have developed an exercise regimen called praise moves, the Christian alternative to yoga. Well, as Kara was saying, I didn't look at the website. You guys can do that later or while I'm sitting here talking. I don't care. But Kara said that many of the positions are really similar to yoga positions. So if yoga positions in and of themselves are not the main issue, then why was it necessary to come up with a Christian alternative? That's irritating too. So, although generally well written, this as this article was, the idea of someone who is faithful to their ancient monotheistic religion in a time where the world and all of our culture is multicultural and religiously diverse as societies go, you can do whatever you want as long as it does not oppress someone else's beliefs or practices, as long as those practices are legal and generally not against any actual moral laws that it holds. Anyway, so in general, and to sum up, I am irritated by the fact that people don't just accept and dismiss the practices of others by the fact that they feel it necessary to demean or belittle or take all of this information about also the idea that one candidate from Virginia had all this stuff dug up about him is also kind of a so damn what? But I would want to know. I would want to know that he held those views if he were running in my state, so that I could say, no, you fundamentalist whack job, get out of my candidacy. That's just me. Or maybe it's not just me, but, I am that way. So the idea that yoga is satanic is stupid, considering the fact that Hinduism doesn't really follow the same lines as Satan and Yahweh. And if you're trying to interject your religion into somebody else's spiritual belief and practice, you're going to find clashing issues. The idea is not to empty yourself. The idea is to calm yourself and rid yourself of excess, whether that be negativity or, just excess strain, stress, too much thinking, an overactive imagination, or thinking too much, or whatever that is. Yoga and meditation and mantras and all of those things are intended to calm yourself and quiet oneself so one can then listen to what is important for you to hear. Anyhow, I think I covered everything, and if I didn't, I am so sorry I took up this much time just to ramble and read that to you. But hopefully you guys had the opportunity to read along and come up with some of your own ideas. I'd like to hear what you guys think about this and about this idea of political, spiritual combination of why the hell are we so interested in other people's religions, especially when they're going to be in charge of us. I'd like to hear about that kind of stuff in the comment section below. But that is it for me this time. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns for me, feel free to leave those in the comment section below. I'll try and keep an eye on for the next week or so. But thank you for watching, everybody, and of course, until next time, Odin be with you.